أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على خير المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. So welcome back. We're now well and truly in the section on buying. I think this is our third or fourth class in the section on buying and selling and related issues. So last time we were talking about different types of sales that are prohibited, including things like selling dogs and gharar, which we talked about last time, which is when there is undue risk or almost like gambling within a transaction because of an unknown quantity. So he continues with that same topic today to tackle other aspects of gharar in sales. So the next one he talks about is وَلَا يَجُوزُ بَيْءُ اللَّحْمِ بِالْحَيَوَانِ مِنْ جِنْسِهِ. It is not permitted to sell meat, that is the meat of an animal that's been killed already, for a live animal of the same category of that animal. Now, if we mentioned before, categories are not what you think. It's not like sheep are one category, cattle are one category. No, land animals are all one category when it comes to meat in buying and selling. So if you have lamb, you can't take a huge amount of lamb and buy a cow with that lamb. You're not allowed to do it. The other category is land. This is land creatures, basically four-legged creatures. The other categories are creatures of the sea, which includes fish and turtles and crocodiles and things like that. They're all one category. So you can't buy a live fish, except of course if your plan in buying that thing is for something totally different. That changes it. If your plan in buying the animal is not that you're going to use it for meat, but you're going to use it purely for milk, for example, then that's different. Actually, because of the usage is different, it becomes allowed again. The prohibition is on the doubtful of selling an unknown amount for a known amount. So when you have meat, you know how much meat you have. And when you buy an animal, you don't know how much meat you're going to get out of that animal. So the prohibition is on that basis. So if you're buying the animal for a totally different reason, like as if, something to ride, for example, like a camel to ride rather than to eat, then it's totally different. Another thing is these sorts of transactions, whenever you do food for food, have to be hand to hand. That's something you always have to remember. So it's never allowed to be a delay in a transaction of food for food, ever. وَلَا بَيْعَتَانِ فِي بَيْعَةٍ. Another one that I'm sure many of you have heard is not permitted to have two sales in one sale. Now, there's two ways that this can come about. The first is when there's two separate prices. So, for example, you make a commitment to buy something and you do not know which price you're going to get. So the guy says to you, I will sell it to you now. You agree to the sale, and then you don't know what's going to happen yet, which one you're going to take. Basically, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about the situation that people think of when they think of this. So a lot of people now will sell you one price for something if you take it now and a different price if you buy it with a delay. So if you buy the TV now, you can pay 100 quid. If you buy the TV and pay later, it will cost you 120 quid, for example, or you buy it in installments. That's permitted. But if you enter into the sale and you do not know which of those is going to be binding on you, you just know that the sale is binding on you. You say, okay, I will buy the TV. And then the guy says, all right, then I'm choosing for you that it will be, you're buying it now for 100. Or I'm choosing now that you will be buying it for 120 delayed. That's not permitted because you do not know what price you are going to pay when you enter into the sale. That's what they mean. A lot of people get this wrong and they think that it means that you're not allowed to have two separate prices for something. You are allowed to have different prices for something. Because each one would then be its own transaction. Both of those things will be perfectly permissible. I could sell you a TV for 120 if you're going to pay me in a month. That's fine. Or I could sell you a TV if you're going to pay me 100 now. That's fine. They're both fine because delay sometimes has cost implications, and that's perfectly acceptable in a transaction. We're going to come to Bay'at Salam, and the reason for the price sometimes in the Bay'at Salam is because of the length of the delay. Either the person needing the money now in order to do some things before he can get the goods to the buyer. So he will charge maybe less because he's getting the money early. So there is a value to time. So it's permitted to have two separate prices, but not to have them both binding at the same time and you don't know which one you're going to take. So if it's on the basis of choice, that's fine. And the other one is when you have a set price, but you do not know which item you are buying with that price. So you've got two items in front of you, both of them at the same price, and you give the seller your money, and then he chooses for you which one you're going to get. You don't know which thing you're buying, so there's too much uncertainty in this transaction to be allowed. So those are the sorts of transaction. It's not allowed for there to be two sales in one sale.
That means if you're going to buy a stock,
that's a separate issue entirely, which is called Bay' al-Juzaf. When you don't know exactly what you're buying, you're just doing it by eye. You're looking at something and you're choosing it. And there are certain, we're going to come to that later, there's certain conditions attached to that sort of sale. He says, explaining it, وَذَلِكَ أَنْ يَشْتَرِي سِلْعَةً إِمَّا بِخَمْسَةٍ نَقْدًا. And what I mean, he's saying here, by two sales in one sale, is when you buy merchandise either for 5 paid up front, نقدا, أو 10 إلى أجل, or 5 to be paid on a later date. قد لزمته بأحد الثمنين. And it is binding on him to take it at one of those two prices, but he doesn't know which. That's what he means by it, he says. He doesn't explain the other one, but it's the same sort of thing. It's just swapping around the option to be, not the price now, but now the thing that's bought. It's the same concept. ولا يجوز بيع التمر بالرطب. I think we talked before about dates. Now, dates have different degrees of ripeness at which they are eaten, different points at which people pick them off the tree. There's various stages. There's a stage where they are quite hard and they're quite drying, and then there's a stage where they're quite soft and almost liquidy, and then there's a stage when they become dry. So the middle one is called the rat, which is called literally moist, but that's a particular degree of date. One before that's balah, and then the final one is called tamar, which is what most of us eat when we are in Ramadan, that stage of date. You're not allowed to swap one for the other. Because again, when you don't know if you're getting the same amount, because when you buy dates, you're always calculating it based on its measure when it's tamar. Mm-hmm. And you don't know how much that ratab will become of tamar later. You don't know if the measure how much the measure will change by the moisture disappearing from the dates. So it's an uncertainty here. You have a known quantity, which is the tamar, and an unknown quantity, which is the ratab, because dates are always calculated based on the tamar stage when it comes to their volume. So it's something unknown for something known. Again, this is the same principle, all of gharar. Something known for something unknown, or something unknown for something unknown.
Does that mean that you can't sell the dates or can't buy the dates in that stage?
No, you can, yeah. Of course you can. But because you're not allowed to sell dates for dates, but you can buy dates with money for whatever point you want to buy it, so long as they are useful, because you're not allowed to buy things that have no use, which is one of the prohibitions against buying dates on the tree when they're not even ripe yet, because they have no use at that point. And you're not allowed to buy something which is totally without use.
This particular case is mainly valid for barter system, where you're exchanging something for something.
Well, the thing is, we call it barter because that's the modern way of looking at it. But the classical perspective amongst the Arabs was that wealth was divided into different types. Now, gold and silver, dinars and dirhams, yes, that is the asl, that is the basis. Everything is valued in gold and silver. But those other things were considered to be money in their own right. So sometimes they would be used as currency. So you might use dates to buy things. You might use dates to buy a camel. You might use a camel to buy land. You might use wheat to buy a house. All of these things were ways that transactions were done. So, I mean, it is like barter, but normally when we think of barter, we think of like, you know, small things, apples for potatoes, not for like a house with something that's not money. Well, الزبيب بالعنب. So the same thing applies with grapes. Grapes cannot be exchanged for zabib, which is raisins, because again, you don't know how much the grapes are going to shrink before they become raisins. And the measurement, the volume of the crop of the grapevine is in zabib, is measured in zabib, rather than in the grapes themselves. That's how you measure.
As a grape not to dry it into raisin.
Still, the measurement in terms of when zakat becomes due on it, for example, is to do with its amount of as a zabib. Similarly, with olives, when zakat is due, it's to do with the amount of oil that it's going to produce. So, لا الزبيب بالعنب لا متفاضلا ولا مثلا بمثل. Regardless of whether you do the same volume of dates, ratab dates for the same volume of tamar dates, or you do the same volume of raisins for the same volume of grapes, because these are things that were measured by volume rather than weight. Or if it's a different volume, because you're estimating that it's going to turn into a different amount, it's not allowed because of the uncertainty here. ولا رطبا بيابس من جنسه من سائر الثمار. And he says, similarly, you're not allowed to do any ripe fruit for a dried fruit of any other type of fruit of any sort. Figs, you can't do ripe figs for dry figs. Walnuts, you can't do walnuts that are just picked before they've been dried out for walnuts that have been dried out to become nuts, and so on and so on. You're not allowed to do any transaction of that sort. Min sa'ir al-thimari wal-fawakih. So this would apply even to things that don't have zakat on them, like apples and pears and bananas. If you're going to swap dried apples for ripe apples, you're not allowed to do it. You have to use money instead, and then so sell your ones for money and then buy the other ones with money. وَهُوَ مِمَّا نَهَى عَنْهُ وَنُهِيَ عَنْهُ مِنَ الْمُزَابَنَةِ. This is forbidden because of what the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade, which was called muzabana, which was specifically when he was talking about it, selling dates while they were still on the tree for dates that had already been picked. That was the example they had there, because it's something unknown for something known. And another example is something unknown for something unknown, which is when we come to Bay al-Juzaf, an estimated quantity of something that you don't know the exact weight of for something else. So buying the dates on the tree for an estimated quantity of dates. So basically, Juzaf, which is the next section we're coming to, is when you have a pile of something or a bag of something, and neither party knows the exact weight of it or the exact measure of it. And in order to make things easier for people, it permits that type of transaction. You may not have all of the tools to weigh it or measure it when you want to do a transaction. So you're allowed to buy things by estimation, by eye. But one of the conditions is you have to see it. You can't do it purely by somebody explaining to you what's in front of you. So you have to be somebody who is able to see. So this is something, so if it's in a sack, for example, you have to open the sack and see what's in it. And moreover, you have to be somebody who has the capacity to be able to estimate things. You can't, if you're a shopkeeper, see somebody and know that this guy is easily fooled. So you say, la, this is a lot, man. Seriously, a lot more than you realize. You should pay me that amount. And the guy, because of the way you've put it up, maybe you put it on a raised platform so it looks like it's more. You're not allowed to do that either, by the way. Or put it in a hole so he doesn't know how deep the hole is. All of these types of things are not permitted when it comes to Bayt al-Juzaf. It's basically having something open, like a pile or in a warehouse where you can. And one of the other conditions is that it's, especially if things are counted, like say watermelons or something. There has to be so many of them that it's not feasible to count them. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, basically, it's not just purely guesswork. There has to be some level of estimation here, and if you do that, then you are allowed to sell fruit and grain and other things that are mithliyat, that one of them is the same as any other one of them. That's a condition, so long as it's something that's sold by weight or sold by measure or sold by number. Although when it comes to sold by number, it has to be a huge amount. because when it's sold by number, you have to sell it by number if it's pretty easy to count them. Like if you've got a dozen eggs, you won't say, "Oh, I'm selling you these eggs," but and if either party does know how much there is and does not disclose it, the sale is invalid. Because one of them may know it's only 2 kilos, but it's like quoting a price as if it's 10 kilos. Saying, "I don't know how much it is, but it looks a lot." What do you reckon? So you have to be careful in that way as well. But you're not allowed to sell something unknown like this for a known quantity of the same thing, because even though you've estimated sort of how much it is, it's not exact. So he says, "Wala yuba'u juzafun bikaylin min sinfi." You're not allowed to sell something which is estimated or indeterminate, not exactly known, for something of the same measure or the same volume of the same type as it. Or wala juzafun bi juzafin min sinfihi, I think this is a mistake in the Arabic. It should be wala juzafun bi waznin min sinfihi. So basically, there are a number of things here. There's 3 things here. The first, you're not allowed to sell it by weight or measure of the same type as it. And the second is you're not allowed to sell something estimated for another pile of estimated amount. Because again, that's both sides, you don't know how much there is. So if I have a pile of wheat and it looks sort of the same as your pile of wheat, and I want to get rid of my pile of wheat for whatever reason, get your pile of wheat, that's not allowed. And if you know exactly what measure your pile of wheat is, say, I've got a ton of wheat. And I say, I don't know, but it looks similar. Again, we're not allowed to do it. We have to sell it for money. And then buy the other one for money if we desperately want the other one. It's one of the conditions.
You mean like you can't say?
No. You're not allowed to. Exchange is selling in this regard. It's because you're getting something unknown for something known. So it's too much gharar. So basically, a condition of a sale is when both parties want to get benefit from a transaction. And when you want to get benefit from a transaction, there are certain things that you have to know. What you are selling and what you are receiving are 2 of the other things that are part of a sale. That has to be known. It can be estimated, but not too many things estimated within the transaction. And when it is for the same thing, then you are taking a gamble that what you have is more than what he has or less than what he has. So it's basically people will only do this if they think they can come out on top. We're not talking about loans here where you're doing it for somebody else, so the benefit is solely for him. We're talking about you're trying to profit, and you're only going to do this transaction if you think that you're getting something out of it. So the assumption is the person who has the indeterminate amount is taking the weighed amount or the volume that's known, because he thinks that volume is more than the amount that he has, so he's coming out on top. And the other one will be taking his amount because he thinks that it's actually more than his volume, so he'll be coming out on top. So it's a gamble at the end of the day. That's the only reason you do a transaction like that. I mean, people are not doing these types of transactions just because they like the look of the other the other one. It's because they want to get something out of it. And if in a transaction, if you want to get something out of it, you can't have it as a complete gamble. It can't be an unknown thing. Whereas if you do it with money, that's just because that's the value you attach to that particular pile of food. That's fine. Whereas when you're swapping things, it's only because of your estimation that is more or less than what you have. إلا, he says, but he says here, ولا جزاف بجزاف من صنفه إلا أن يتبين الفضل بينهما. Except if it is clear, if the difference in size between the two amounts of food is clear. Because then if somebody's doing it, then it's clear that he's doing it as a favor to the other person. So if it's not clear, then it's a gamble. People are doing it because they want to get out on top. But if somebody has a handful and the other person has a container full, and he says he's going to swap them, he's clearly not doing it because he wants to get something out of the transaction. He's doing it obviously because he's doing a favor for the other person, which then makes it okay, because it's basically then like a gift. So that's okay in that circumstance. إلا أن يتبين الفضل بينهما إن كان مما يجوز التفاضل في الجنس الواحد. So he says here, but only if that swap is permitted. If it is something that you are permitted to have more of one on one side and less on the other. So it can't be grain, for example. It couldn't be gold. If I'm swapping gold, I can't have a handful for a container, for a warehouse full. It can't be grain. It can't be lentils and those other things. But it might be apples, something like apples, or it could be iron, or those things where you're allowed to have more for less. Because there are certain things that you are allowed to have more for less and other things that you're not. So staple foodstuffs, you cannot have more for less of the same type. Gold, you cannot have more for less for the same type. Silver, you cannot have more for less of the same, of silver. Other than those types of things, you can have more for less. So he said this is only permitted because it's obvious that somebody's doing somebody else a favor, and it's not one person thinking that there's more or less in those, so long as it is something that you're allowed to do such a swap with to avoid riba. Because tafadul, more for less is a form of riba. ولا بأس ببيع الشيء الغائب على الصفة. So this is now selling something that has not been seen by the buyer. Happens quite a lot. You will go somewhere, you'll see it, go to Argos, you'll open the catalog, you'll see the picture of the thing you want to buy. That's the description of it, sifa, whether it's with a picture or just an explanation of what it is, and then you buy it without having seen it. Is that okay? He says yes, no harm in that. So long as as the description tells you what the thing is and the qualities of that thing. If you buy the thing and it turns out to be nothing like the description of it, then you're within your rights to reverse the sale and get your money back. But it is permitted, even if it's a property. Somebody describes the house that he wants to sell you, and that house is in a different country. So long as the description is adequate to the task, and when you get there you see that what you've bought matches your description, then it's a binding sale. All of this is permitted. It's also permitted. This is talking about when the item is not present at the transaction. So normally the basis is I bring you the thing I'm selling, and you bring me the money, and we exchange it. That's the basic default sale. But other types of sale are selling something that's elsewhere, or selling something with a delayed payment, or selling something with payment up front with the delayed handover of the goods. Something which is ghaib, which is away, is a form of delayed handing over of the goods. So he says that is permitted, even if the person hasn't seen it before, and even if it's not present. But it's even more permitted if the person has actually seen it before and knows what he's buying. So he's gone to see the house in Cambridge, comes back to Norwich and meets the estate agent and buys it. No problem.
Is that like pre-order? Pre-order. Some websites have pre-order. Before the item comes in stock, you can have a look.
Well, that's that is a more tricky area. That's selling something before you have possession of it, which is only allowed in certain circumstances. For example, if I'm somebody who sells something of the same type always, and it's just coming in and out of stock regularly, then it might be permitted in that case. But if I'm somebody, as we're going to come to a bit later, who goes into the market, for example, and sees something's being sold at a particular price and knows somebody wants to buy that, So I quickly rush off to that person and says, look, I'll sell you that, and I've just got to go and get it. I don't own it yet. So I take the money that he pays me and I use that money to go and buy it. I mean, that's because it's conceivable in this thing. If you're giving money to him up front and he hasn't got it in stock yet, he might use your money to actually buy it, to bring it into stock. So I mean, it depends on the circumstances.
Market, see what the market is like before they bring something into stock to see if there's demand or not.
How do you mean?
Order it. If someone's coming out with a new book,
yeah,
they'll put it up for pre-order first. If they get 100 pre-orders, they'll order 300. Whereas if they get 1,000 pre-orders, they'll then like print 3,000.
Yeah, so I mean, again, that might fall within the category because the sort of person they say is allowed to do this, to sell before he has possession of it, is somebody like a baker, who gets the money in the morning, then gets the flour and makes the bread and sells it. But some people add that he has to have the flour already there because he just run out of stock and he has to bake some more. So you know, it's a tricky issue. Those sorts of things, it's better to avoid getting involved in those types of transactions. I mean, that's almost like an istisna in that case. You're paying somebody money to make something for you with a book. It's a tricky one. وَلَا يَنْقُضُ فِيهِ. But if you do buy something that's absent, that's not present at the sale, you should not pay upfront for it. So you can buy it, you can make the agreement, it's now binding on you, but he says here, you should not give the money up front if that is a precondition, bishartin, if that is a precondition in the sale. In other words, you can be generous and give the money up front, but if it is stipulated in the sale, or if it is a custom of the land that you are in, which is basically the same as it being a stipulation, or if you met before with the guy and conspired to do that, all of those are ways that it's not allowed. But if you agree the sale and says, look, okay, I'm buying that based on the description, but I want to go and see it, it becomes binding on you when you see it, and you can hand over the money then, if it matches the description. Even though the sale is made at the time, nobody else can then come forward and buy it because you've bought it. So now you who is the buyer, but you don't hand over the money until you see it.
So, for example, you bought something, you've gone and seen it, matches might slightly be out.
Well, it's already binding on you the moment you agree it, but it's just the handing over of the money.
What happens if you go to the seller and say, actually, I don't.
Well, you can't say you don't want it unless it fails to match the description. You'll get forced by the qadi to pay the money. You agreed the sale. The only way out for you is if it fails to match the description that you agreed it upon.
So when we're buying things, for example, online, and we're paying up front and then they're sent to us, we're doing that all the time. I mean, most of the time, probably the things are there in stock.
Well, again, we're doing that, you know, based upon description. There are certain circumstances where you just can't avoid it. So he says here, if you can say it's on the basis of you doing it from yourself, but if it's a precondition, which it often is, but then it becomes yours at the moment you buy it in a lot of those circumstances. He says here, illa an yaqruba makanahu, except if it is close by. And some people have said close is within a day or two. So, I mean, if it's a long way away that it will take a month to get there, then that wouldn't be allowed. Yeah, I know that's the problem with some of these orders, but it takes. But it's pretty much across the board now. I mean, it's part of the way of the world that we live in, unfortunately. That people all work for major corporations rather than buying and selling individually between themselves. So everything is stockpiled in certain places rather than lots of people having that thing and people being able to go and buy it from them. So there's some of these things that we have to cover, we have to work out ways of dealing with. It shows you the unnatural way of the world as we are living in it. وَيَكُونُ مِمَّنْ يُؤْمَنُ تَغَيُّرُهُ. Or, he says here, you can pay up front if it is close by, or if it is the thing that you're buying is something that will not change no matter how much time passes. Something which is secure. He says here, such as a house. A house is not something that's going to change in the time between you buying it and getting to it. So you can pay up front. Or land, or trees, like an orchard of date palms or something like that. He says all those things you can pay up front, there's no harm. فَيَجُوزُ النَّقْدُ فِيهِ. It is permitted to pay up front for all of these things. And as I said, located nearby is 1 or 2 days. So the majority of things in the modern world will get to you within that sort of period of time. Or you can say that the whole world now is 1 or 2 days away, in a sense. So I suppose maybe that's how they might get around some of that. Allahu alam. The liability transfers at the point of sale when it comes to things like houses. So if the house burns down by lightning strike or something, after you've made your agreement, you're the owner.
Even for the money.
Well, no, you're the moment you make the agreement for a house or something like that. I mean, you're allowed to pay up front, but even if you haven't paid up front, yes, you are the owner the moment the agreement is made. Because so if it's a house or the trees, you know, you buy some date palms and then suddenly a whole load of fruit worms come and eat everything, you're the one who loses. Whereas if you buy something like a suit, and then he goes to collect the suit, and by the time he gets there, the suit has been eaten by cloth worms or whatever, then he's liable, not you. The seller is liable then. So if something is secure, like property, it's considered unlikely that things are going to happen. And if they do, that's just on the buyer. But if things are more changeable, the seller is liable for them until he hands them over. And it's on him. It's actually on the buyer to go and get it. Most of the time for these things. You can't expect if he buys something that necessary delivery, which is what happens in the modern world. If you're buying something, then it depends what you agree, but the default position is the buyer is the one who has to go and get it. That's why when you buy things on Gumtree, for example, on Facebook, it's not on the seller to get it to you. That's just the default way of sale. It's on the buyer to go and get it. That's the majority of things. It's not like the modern world where it's basically always on the seller to send it to you. Things have flipped somewhat. والأهدة جائزة في الرقيق إن اشترطت أو كانت جارية بالبلد. So we talked before about khiyar, which is an option where when you buy something, you can buy it if you stipulate this, that you have the option of returning it after a period of time, which you have a look at it and get to know it and see whether you actually want it or not. And you can stipulate that, and the length of time you can stipulate for depends upon various things. That's called a khiyar. And that's, you have the option whether there's anything defective in it or whether it's perfectly fine. For those 3 days or that week, you can return it. That's called a khiyar. Then on top of that, when it comes to slaves, there is something else which is added either by custom or because of people stipulating it, which is called an uhda, which is a warranty. So this is if anything happens to the slave in that period of time, the seller is liable, not you. So for example, if you buy a slave and you have the khiyar of the slave, and then at the end of it, you decide you're going to buy it. And then you also had the condition of this uhda, this warranty, which is 3 days for pretty much usually for anything when it comes to a slave. And then the slave falls sick and dies within those 3 days. You can get your money back. Basically. That's on the seller. And the seller also has to feed the slave or the animal, or whatever it is that's being sold during that period of time. Everything is on him. He's fully liable until that period of time ends. But if there's nothing wrong with the slave, you're not allowed to return the slave in that warranty period. It's only for things wrong with it. which is the difference between it and the khiyar. You can return the slave if nothing's wrong with the slave. You just decide you don't want it.
And what the terms are agreed by the two.
Yeah, well, khiyar is basically a choice period where you examine the thing, decide if you want it. Then the moment that period ends, the norm, which was basically the custom across all sales of slaves, was that you had this thing called an order, which was understood to be part of the transaction. When something is part of the custom, it's the same as if it's stipulated or written down in the contract. So with these things, he's saying you have to stipulate them, but it depends. It's only in a place where that isn't part of the custom. Now, this 3-day period was basically always done with slaves, and that is because slaves are, unlike any other. This only applies to slaves. Slaves, unlike anything else, have the ability to hide things wrong with them. In order, for example, maybe they desperately want to get away from the previous owner. So they pretend that there's nothing wrong with them in order that somebody else buys them. And then in that 3 days, you'll find that out. So, that's the purpose of why it's allowed with slaves and not anybody else, because they are uqala, they're people. Nope. I mean, animals, if an animal has the ability to pretend that it's not lame or yeah, pretty intelligent animal. وَالْأُهْدَةُ جَائِزَةٌ فِي الرَّقِيقِ. It is permitted in raqiq if it is stipulated in the contract, أو كان جارية بالبلد, or it is a custom that is there within the land or the town that you live in. Or on top of this, if it is something that's imposed by the authorities. They say, look, we've had so many issues with people buying slaves and transactions going wrong. We are making it a rule in this country that anybody who buys a slave has to do this order. That's allowed as well. He says, فَعُهْدَةُ الثَّلَاث الضَّمَانْ فِيهَا مِنَ الْبَائِعِ مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ. The 3-day warranty, in that the seller is liable for absolutely everything that happens to the slave, any accident, any defect that he or she develops, whatever happens to the slave to damage the slave or make the slave worth less, it is on the seller in that period of time. Well, that's a different thing. I mean, that's called a jinaya. That's like an assault or something. If the buyer goes outside of the limits of what is allowed with the slave, whatever it might be, beating or telling the slave to go on a yeah, or telling that, I mean, if it's outside of the limits of what should be done with a particular slave of that sort, like the slave is a massive, big guy and there's a tiny little ladder, he says, climb up there. I mean, any of these circumstances, if he goes outside of the limits, then he is liable. When we're talking about accidents, we're talking about things that you have no control over, which just happen as part of life. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. Or, the slave falls ill, and it's a serious illness that causes him or her to lose eyesight, or whatever it might be. All of these things happen. So they have to work out the liability. And if you've bought somebody, and you've specified this, then that's to give yourself a bit of protection. If you suspect that the slave might be hiding some potential for illness or some accident proneness or whatever it might be. It says here, وَعُهْدَةُ السَّنَةِ, and there's a second warranty, which was often stipulated as well, which is a year-long warranty period, which is for madness or insanity and leprosy, or those types of diseases that are, sometimes signs of them take a bit longer to be seen. So for example, if somebody is mad, he may have been brought in a period of sanity. And within a year, if somebody is mad, they will show signs of being mad. Obviously, it's not just one-off, because that might just be a one-off thing, if something happened to make a person. So it has to be more than once, but a year is a long enough period of time to actually demonstrate that they are defective in a serious way. I mean, obviously, a mad, insane slave is not really going to fit the purpose that you've bought that slave for. ولا بأس بالسلم. So we have another type of sale here. So the main default sale is I pay you now and you give me the goods now, hand to hand. The second most common type of sale is I take the goods from you and I pay you later, buying something on credit, which is a very common type of transaction. Because, you know, you find the goods available now and you need them now, and you are going to get your paycheck at the end of the month. So you buy it on that basis. That's very, very common. And that's also the way a lot of people will buy a house, for example. They'll take the house and they'll pay in installments over a long period of time. So a lot of the money is delayed, it's not paid up front. And this other one is when the payment is made now and the goods are delayed, which is also permitted, even though on the surface it is like buying something or selling something you don't have possession of. So it's like an exception from the prohibition on selling something you don't have possession of, because there's a need for it in societies, especially with farmers, for example. If they have their crops and they want to sell a certain amount of the produce a little bit early, because they will help them in bringing in all of the crops, they'll do that, things like that. So that type of sale is permitted, but there are certain conditions attached. It can't be, there has to be a delay. You can't pay it now and take it almost straight away. The delay is, as he's going to mention in a moment, is a minimum of 2 weeks. But for certain things, it's longer. Because otherwise, if it's straight away, then it's basically selling something you don't have possession of, which is not allowed. So there has to be a delay. The deadline for the collection of the goods or the delivery of the goods has to be specified. It can't be left in the open without any specifications. So you can't say, I will pay you £100 now and I will get 100 kilos of apples from you at some point in the future. No, you have to actually mention the date. It could be not an actual date, but it could be when something happens that everybody knows the sort of time that happens. For example, when the harvest comes, I will pay you now and I will collect my dates when they're harvested. Or, you know, I will pay you now and I will collect my clothes that I bought from you when the Hajjis return. Because the season when people go on Hajj and come back is quite well known. So these types of things, it might not be an exact date. They often used to do it in the past. I will pay you when this is when you're paying on credit. I will pay you when my stipend comes in, because they were given a minha from the people who were in the early times, those who fought at Badr, those who fought at Uhud. They had a certain amount that they were given each month, and they would buy things and say they would pay when they received that minha. That's opposite. That's paying money on credit, but it's the same principle. It has to the deadline has to be specified.
Service, like if somebody's going to do something.
Generally speaking, yes, but you can't have both delayed. Yeah.
So I can give you this money and you're going to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have to then specify the days, or can you just say
no?
You do this many hours?
We're going to come to ijara, but you have to specify. Well, yeah, it depends what you're buying. If you have to specify exactly what it is you are buying, if it's so many hours of work, that can't be left in the rest of your life, though. I mean, it says you'd have to do it on the basis of so many hours, at least such and such an amount per week, for example. I mean, you have to specify as much as possible with all these types of transactions, because if you buy 10 hours from somebody, I mean, they have to start their work usually better immediately, but it doesn't always have to be. But if you just leave it in the open, he could come back when he's 90. Yeah. I will help you painting the house. So you have to make a bit more specification. ولا بأس بالسلم في العروض والرقيق والحيوان والطعام والإدام. There's no harm in doing this salam transaction, which is money up front, And again, he's going to mention, I think in a moment, yeah, I'll wait till he gets there. You can buy anything with this, he says. You can buy urud, which is non-cash goods like household possessions here, because he mentions other types of goods, or slaves, or animals. Usually when they're talking about animals, they mean the animals that you have a use for, like camels and horses and so on. And ta'am, any sort of food. And idam, which is things, condiments like honey and things like that. There's no harm in buying any of these types of things. Paying your money up front and having them delivered to you or collecting them later. No issue. He says here, بِصِفَةٍ مَعْلُومَةٍ, but on condition that it is by description. Why does he say this? And a known description. In other words, the description is enough to say it what it is. What this means is you can't buy something specific. So I go to your house and I see your horse. And then I say, okay, I'll pay you £100 now and I will collect your horse in 2 months. That's not allowed. Because what you are effectively doing, the price that you are giving him is because of the fact that he's going to have liability for the horse for the next 2 months, and you're going to be free of that liability, and you're only waiting for that horse in 2 months' time. So the price, you're factoring in the fact that you don't have to worry about it just yet, or he's factoring in that he'll continue to get use of it for 2 more months. So he's giving you. So it depends which way around this works, but that's not permitted. It's only for things that are by description. So not specific things that already exist in the hands of the seller, that you basically go, no, I want that particular pile of food, or that sack of grain. That's the one I want. That wouldn't be allowed.
Okay. So what happens, for example, you gave the example of the horse. So if you've agreed to buy that horse, and you say, actually, well, it's mine now, but I'm going to let you use it for 2 months.
Yes, okay, if you want to do that, but you're liable.
Yeah. So
Whereas in the other thing, he's liable.
now
What you're doing then is you're then just lending it to him. I mean, that's a separate thing.
It's all about the liability.
Yes, it's to do with liability. I mean, because the only reason that you do the other one is because you don't want to have the trouble of looking after the horse now. وَأَجَلٌ مَعْلُومٌ, and as we mentioned before, you have to specify the exact day or the sort of period of time at least, so it's a known. If it's harvesting, for example, if you simply say until the harvesting, that's not when the early harvest happens. That's when most of that type of crop is harvested, and not even the late harvest. So it would be by what the norm is of that particular crop. وَيُعَجِّلُ رَأْسَ الْمَالِ, he says here, and you have to pay the money, the capital, the purchase price upfront, or يؤخره إلى مثل يومين أو ثلاثة أيام, or you can delay it 2 or 3 days, because sometimes you're buying something quite big and it takes you a little bit of time to gather all of the cash together. So you're given a little bit of leeway, but no more than that. By Maghrib on the 3rd day, you're not allowed. The thing is cancelled. It's not a valid sale because it becomes a debt for a debt. So it becomes a debt for a debt. Then, if you're delaying the capital and delaying the goods, you owe me the goods, I owe you the capital. So you are claiming a debt from me and I'm claiming a debt from you, which is not permitted. He's going to come and there's 3 different types of debt for debt that's not permitted from the hadith of the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's why, but you are allowed a little bit of leeway, like 2 or 3 days, because it's basically considered almost the same as giving it straight away. So that's allowed a little bit of leeway, but no more than that. In kana bishartin, he says, even if it is stipulated in the sale that you have 2 or 3 days to pay it all, that's fine. Even more so if it's not stipulated, that's fine. But as I said, as soon as you go beyond those 3 days, the sale is cancelled. So you can't do a thing, for example, that a lot of people will do today, is, for example, I will buy a car from you that's to be delivered at the end of the year. It's not made yet. They're manufacturing the car. They go and buy the car up front. I want to be one of the first. So I pay some of the money now, and then I'm going to pay by installments until I get the car. That's not allowed. That's not allowed because most of the purchase price is owed by you. Even if you've paid a little bit up front, it's the debt for a debt, because most of the purchase price is still owed.
You mean like
They owe you a car, and you owe them the remainder of your purchase price in installments until that point. That's totally forbidden. And that's fine. So long as it's not a specific car, as I said. It's like a generic based on the picture you've seen there. I want that car, I'll pay the money for it.
do you mean if you're paying for it, you haven't had the car yet? Is that what you mean? Or
Yes. I mean that the car is not even, the seller hasn't even got the car yet. It's not even made, for example. I mean, and there's another one where you actually pay him to make something for you, which is called istisna. And again, you have to pay up front for that. But he will then use it to buy the ingredients with, or the material with which to make whatever it is for you. That's fine. But you cannot delay the payment. وأجل السلم أحب إلينا أن يكون 15 يوما. He says here the minimum period of time for a salam that I prefer, in other words, that is the position within the madhab, is 15 days. In other words, the date for the delivery of goods, the minimum date for the delivery of the goods is 15 days from now. That's the minimum. But very often it would have been half a year sometimes. It'll be a long time in the future. Because again, that's to avoid selling something that you don't possess. Or that you will take possession of it in a different place or a different location or a different town. So somebody who has a warehouse full of grain in Baghdad sells that grain to somebody in Medina. That guy in Medina pays him the money now. Then he travels to Baghdad and claims it there. He maybe arrives in Baghdad a week later. That's fine, even though it's not 15 days that's passed, because it's in another place. But there are conditions that he has to set out for that place immediately, and that it becomes his the moment he sets foot in that other place. He doesn't go there and then just hang around, until he feels like it's safe enough for him to take it without having to worry about liability for it and so on. So there are conditions, so that means that a deadline is either a time or place. Place is considered to be the same as time if it's a certain distance away. If it's very, very close, it's considered to be basically only by time. And that's within a day or two's journey. Then you can't do it on the basis of distance, you have to do it on time. He says here, أو على أن يقبض ببلد آخر وإن كانت مسافته يومين أو ثلاثة. Even if the distance between the place that you live in and the place where the goods are is 2 or 3 days journey. In other words, quite close, but not 1 day's journey. 1 day's journey is considered to be next door. I mean, it's amazing. They consider it's traveling for a whole day to be basically next door. ومن أسلم إلى 3 أيام يقبضه ببلد أسلم فيه فقد أجازه غير واحد من العلماء وكرهه آخرون. He says, so this is the dominant position, but there is another position, and that is that if you buy something, you pay for it now to collect in 3 days' time, and you don't leave your city, you're going to collect it in the same city. There are among the ulama, he says, غير واحد, more than one, a number of them, who said that's fine. أجازه, said it's permitted. وكرهه آخرون, but others disliked it. But he's already mentioned the initial position is 15 days. And that is the position that we take to avoid the thing that he talks about next, which is selling something that you don't own. So we will come to that next time with your permission. Oh no, there's a bit more here with the salam before we finish. وَلَا يَجُوزُ أَنْ يَكُونَ الرَّأْسُ الْمَالِ مِنْ جِنْسِ مَا أُسْلِمَ فِيهِ. It's not permitted for the thing that you use as payment, because we mentioned before, you don't always use cash as payment, you can use other things. You cannot pay with something that is the same type of thing as that which you are collecting later. So if I'm buying wheat and I'm collecting that wheat in 2 weeks' time or when it's harvested, I can't pay for it with wheat now. Because food for food has to be?
It would have to be another kind of food.
Yeah, you could do it with another type of food, yeah. But when it's the same type of food, one of the conditions of food for food is that it's hand to hand. So that basically you're not doing that when you're paying with the same type of food. وَلَا يُسْلَمُ شَيْءٌ فِي جِنْسِهِ أو فِيمَا يَقْرُبُ مِنْهُ إِلَّا أَنْ يَقْرُضَهُ. So he says, and when you do that, basically, if you are giving the same thing that you are collecting later, it's basically simply a loan. Because we don't care about the words that are used. If I call something a salam, and then basically, to all intents and purposes, it's a loan. If I give you £100 now and say, look, I'm buying £100 from you in 2 weeks' time, the fact that I've called it, the fact that I'm buying £100 for you as a salam, doesn't make it that. What I'm doing is I'm giving you 100 and getting back 100 from you. It's a loan. So that's what, when it's the same type of thing that you have to take into account. So he says here, therefore, the rules of a loan apply. So if it's the same amount and the same quality, it's permitted. And it's simply a loan. If it is a different amount or a different quality, it's not permitted. And with certain things, it's not permitted, outside of food, unless it's for a different use. So, for example, you buy a horse to plow your fields with a horse to be used in battle later, and that would be different. That would be okay because they have a completely different use. So he says here, وَلَا يُسْلَمُ شَيْءٌ فِي جِنْسِ. Something cannot be paid up front for something of the same type of it or that is similar to it. In other words, it has the same sort of usage. إِلَّا أَنْ يَقْرُضَهُ شَيْئًا فِي مِثْلِهِ صِفَةً وَمِقْدَارًا وَالنَّفْعُ لِلْمُتَسَلِّفِ. Except if the thing that you are claiming that is of the same type, so I'm paying you wheat now, and the wheat that I'm getting later is exactly the same amount, exactly the same type, and the same breed or variety, then that's fine, he says. So long as all the benefit is for the mutasallif. So long as all the benefit is for the person who effectively is borrowing the food. Because what's happened here is actually the one who's been paid up front is borrowing it. So when you have a loan, we mentioned this last time, that when you have a loan, all of the benefit has to go to the borrower and the lender cannot get any benefit whatsoever. So that could be an amount. I could lend you 100 and say I want 110 back. I'm obviously getting benefit from that as the lender. That's not allowed. Or I could lend you a poor quality of wheat and say I want a good quality of wheat back later. Again, I'm benefiting from it. That's not allowed. Or I could have a warehouse full of wheat that I'm worried is going to get robbed, or there's going to be a storm coming the next week and I want it off my hands. So I lend it to you, wanting to get wheat back later. Again, I'm getting a benefit from it. That's not permitted. So the benefit in the loan can only be for the borrower. And so he says here, even if you call it a salam, what's happened in this particular case is simply a loan. And so you cannot benefit, O lender, or the person who is paying the money. All right. So we'll finish there, inshallah. That's the end of salam. Are there any questions about salam? It's not very, there are forms of this that are done now, but it's not super. If both sides are benefited, then it's a sale. or something resembling a sale. If one side benefits, then that's what's called in Arabic a ma'roof, and that includes things like lending people, that includes giving people gifts, that includes what's called an ariya, which is giving somebody the crop of a particular group of trees and so on. And so there are various types of things, but the benefit is all on one side. They're a different type of transaction. So he says here, even though a salam is theoretically a transaction where benefit is on both sides because it's a sale, when you pay the same thing that you're going to collect later, it's not in reality a sale. Yeah. Anyway, we'll finish there, inshallah. بسير وبركاته بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. See you next time, inshallah. We will